Order. The question is that the amendment be disagreed to, and I call the honourable member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise in support of the changes to the Customs Tariff Act, which is a Customs Amendment 2022 Harmonised System Changes Bill of 2021. And I want to acknowledge all those previous speakers who've spoken on such an important bill. It's not very often that you get to speak on bills like this in this place, but today is one of them, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to speak on it. Mr Deputy Speaker, Australia is a trading nation. It relies on its ability to be able to trade with the world. It was once said of Australia that we relied on the back of the sheep. We now, thankfully, have diversified much of our income to minerals, education, all sorts of things which we trade with the rest of the world. The Minister for Agriculture often stands up in this place and talks about we create 5 times the amount of food and fibre in Australia than what we consume. So we need to be able to trade that with the world, and that is a part of our ongoing ability to be able to maintain our standard of living. In order for us to be able to do this, there are certain rules that we need to comply with. The WTO, for example, we're a proud member of the WTO, and we, as Australians, pride ourselves on being a part of a rules-based order. And that's not just important when it comes to security, but it's also important when it comes to trade. Where we see our relationships with China at the moment, as an example, where China has banned or put such restrictions on some Australian goods like wine and beef and barley and some coal products. Those are decisions that have been made outside the international's rules-based order, outside agreements, fundamental agreements that we have made as members of the WTO. Now, that is to the eternal shame of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's something that we should continue to fight for Australians and Australian businesses, Australian growers, Australian manufacturers, that China continue, or that they change their view on this and that they start observing the international rules-based order in how they deal with countries like Australia. Because, as the Prime Minister often says, we will continue to stand up for Australia and Australians' interests, even if that means upsetting some of our international friends and other countries as well. We will continue to stand up for Australian interests, and certainly I will play my part in doing that. Talking about WTO, talking about trade, talking about tariffs leads me to this bill. The purpose of the Customs Tariff Amendment 2022 Harmonised System Changes Bill of 2021 is to update Australia's tariff codes in the Customs Tariff Act, to be consistent with the updated international 2022 harmonised system. The 2022 harmonised system is the common name for the harmonised commodity description and coding system. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I know that you are absolutely fascinated by this subject and that you are absolutely on board with it, as most members are. But you'll be keen to know that these new provisions will commence on the 1st of January next year in 2022. The World Customs Organisation updates the international harmonised system on a 5-yearly basis, not 4 years, not 6 years, 5 years. to reflect changing trade patterns and emerging goods. Now, all World Customs Organisation members, which includes Australia, need to implement the 2022 harmonised system in their domestic tariff codes once again by the 1st of January 2022. Now, the 2022 harmonised system update will ensure that international tariff codes can keep pace with modern types of goods and changing trade patterns. Now, changes to reflect technological change. For example, there's new classifications will be created for new and emerging products like drones and 3D printers, and classifications for products that nobody wants to buy anymore, like world globes and answering machines. I mean, Mr Deputy Speaker, you would not want to be in a business right now where you're trying to buy and sell world globes and answering machines, would you? You just, and facsimiles. Thank you to the member for Leichhardt. You just wouldn't want to be in that sort of business right now. However, there are new classifications that will be created for products with increasing or diversifying patterns of trade. Not that I'd want to be in this sort of business, Mr Deputy Speaker, but edible insects, for example, are the in thing, and there'll be changes in relation to those things. Other certain electronic components will also see new classifications because of increasing patterns of consumption. I don't know why anybody would want to eat edible insects, but I guess that's a matter for them. Now, there are also new classifications that will be created to improve the monitoring of goods such as electronic e-waste and chemicals and substances controlled under international conventions such as the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. We all remember the chlorofluorocarbons, wasn't it, that used to be in the fly spray and all of the aerosols, and Australia banned those with good reason because they deplete the ozone. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, as a rule, Australia implements changes to our tariff code required to be consistent with the updated harmonised system on a duty rate neutral basis. That is, whatever duty rate applies to goods under their old classification will continue to apply to the good under its new classification. For the current update, 3 categories of goods cannot be updated on a duty rate neutral basis. These 3 categories of goods are flat panel displays, semiconductor-based transducers, and electronic waste and scrap. We'll create new classifications for these 3 categories of goods as part of the 2022 harmonised system. Goods will transfer to these new classifications from many different existing classifications, which means it's not possible to maintain all the different duty rates that may have applied to these goods. The duty rates for these 3 categories of goods will be set as free to ensure that no importers are worse off. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, to be a little controversial, I'm never one to turn away from being a little controversial, I want to turn to the changes to tobacco products. Now, to any kids that might be listening to this, tobacco is not good for you if you're smoking. Don't smoke, kids. If you're in the car, you shouldn't be smoking in the car. If you're a parent with kids in the back, you shouldn't be smoking with kids in the back. If you're an adult and you want to smoke, well, you know, I'd love to be able to say you should just go ahead and do it, but you know, you are not only impacting on your own health and your family's health, but you're impacting on the public purse, because chances are you're going to get sick before you should get sick, and the public is going to have to look after you when you go into hospital. So if you're smoking right now, put it out and quit smoking. You'll be all the better for it. However, I digress, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the changes to tobacco products as part of the 2022 harmonised system will create a new classification for tobacco products intended for inhalation without combustion. This is these new fandangled e-cigarettes for vaping. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't know too much about vaping, and I know that I'll probably get lots of emails about vaping now because I've said that, but it just seems to me that people who are inhaling these products, they are, what I do know is that they are full of chemicals. And I've heard the arguments before that vaping turns people away from cigarettes. And look, I don't know if that's true or not, but the concept of breathing in chemicals can't be good for you, can it, Mr Deputy Speaker? It just can't be good for you. So if you're not only if you're smoking cigarettes or vaping, put it aside, put it away. It's probably not good for you. But anyway, if you are going to continue to vape, these goods are currently classified as other tobacco and have an excise equivalent customs duty of $1,576.50 per kilogram of tobacco content applied. Now, we need to amend the Customs Act to ensure that this new classification falls within the scope of existing border measures for tobacco products. This means importers will continue to pay duty on these goods at the border like all other tobacco products, so there is no new risk to the revenue, because that's all important. We also need to amend the Customs Tariff Act to ensure the excise equivalent customs duty rate applied to these goods is indexed twice a year like other tobacco. Mr Deputy Speaker, I know you are on the edge of your seat right now, but I want to conclude by saying that these changes will help Australian businesses. Australian businesses, both importers and exporters, are expecting these changes to be implemented on the 1st of January 2022. Ensuring Australia's tariff code reflects the most up-to-date version of the harmonised system will make it easier for our importers and our exporters to trade with other countries. And as I said at the opening of my speech, that is a very important thing. We have to be able to trade with the world. So these sorts of mechanical bills, whilst as boring as they possibly can be, are very, very important, not just for our businesses, but they are also important for our country's revenue. The sooner the amending legislation is introduced into Parliament, the sooner business can begin preparing for the new version of the harmonised system. Australia was able to secure a number of important outcomes requested by Australian businesses in the process of negotiating the update to the harmonised system. Now, I know, Mr Deputy Speaker, you're wondering what changes we were able to secure, and that is a very good question to ask. These priority outcomes included securing our preferred definition of virgin olive oil. They included a single classification code for placebos and clinical trial kits, and our preferred classification for LED lighting products, and separate classification for synthetic diamonds. The harmonised system has 97 chapters, almost as long as this speech, Mr Deputy Speaker, split into headings and subheadings. Each heading and subheading has a unique code and description which can be used to classify all tradable goods. These codes and descriptions are agreed to by all 198 members of the World Customs Organisation members, including Australia. Australia, Mr Deputy Speaker, independently determines the customs duties that apply to goods traded into Australia, we use the structure provided by the harmonised system, supplemented by domestic subheadings, to identify those goods that are subject to Australian customs duties. And I will withdraw. I will be very mindful. I'll hesitate to ask for an extension of time, but I'll think I'll leave it there, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for Fisher.